The following program is made possible by Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
There is no political off-season, just one campaign and one dispute after another. Who's on top and who's hot?
Our dynamic duo of political analysis, Marinucci and Whalen, is here to tell us all about it and who's going to win and who's going to lose. It's not called The Game for no reason at all, and it's all about politics. The game is on.
I'm Kitty Lopez.
And I'm Mark Simon. Welcome to The Game.
Sexting, immigration, Obamacare, Egypt, Hillary, Christie and Filner. The list gets longer and the controversy thickens.
To sort it all out, we're joined by our favorite duo, Bill Whalen of the Hoover Institution and senior political writer of the San Francisco Chronicle, Carla Marinucci. Thanks for being here, both of you. It's always a pleasure.
So I'm going to plow in. Carla, you wrote about Hillary's visit to San Francisco. Is she off and running?
That's right. The sound you heard was the door of 2016 swinging wide open. I mean, she got huge press up in San Francisco at the American Bar Association. Of course, talked about voter registration and voter issues. This is an issue that plays well. You know, we also saw up there in San Francisco that her team is already at work scoping out potential supporters. Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom told us he was in the back of the auditorium just watching the speech, and they came up to him and said, the secretary would like to meet with you. It's already starting, folks. Wow. It's already starting.
Right.
So, Bill, is she the most formidable candidate, you think?
For the Dems?
It's interesting. There is a saying that Democrats use at Republicans' expense that Democrats fall in love and Republicans fall in line when it comes to getting the party's nomination. And indeed, going back to Ronald Reagan and Gerald Ford, there's a pattern of you're the runner-up, and then 4 years later you get the Republican nomination. Not so this time for Republicans, but it looks that way on the Democratic side, where Hillary Clinton, it's her turn. So she is the person to fear for them, but the road is not as easy for her all the way to the White House as you may think. As soon as she gives that speech, we immediately have a blistering article in the New York Times about the Clinton Foundation's finances. And Maureen Dowd starts writing scathing articles about, can we really stand the Clintons for another 4 to 8 years? So that phrase, Clinton fatigue, kind of is not too far behind wherever she goes.
And I think that's the interesting thing about this appearance. You know, she announced a series of speeches. It does put her now front and center and opens up that whole line of attack, Bill said. We're also seeing, however, on the fundraising side, on the support side, the Ready for Hillary PAC is up and running, and people like Susie Tompkins Buell, a very big supporter, a very big generous donor to the Democratic Party, is already making calls to people around the state.
Yeah, but to be very far out at this point, it is a long way to 2016.
Right. Yeah,
even though we're talking about it,
yeah.
we have another year to go until we have a midterm election, and we have to see how voters vote in that. And then you're into 2015, and the Democrats will have to test the public's mood toward the president and change and so forth. So to be out this front, it's a little kind of like Tracy Flick in election. It's a little too aggressive.
It does raise the question, though, in terms of Clinton fatigue. I think there are things about them that we're all just really done with. On the other hand, does she get the kind of bump because she could be the first woman president that Obama got as the first African American?
That's what I hear as I go around the state and talk to people, that women out there, even Republican women, are looking at this and saying this could be the historic moment. They'd like to see, they'd like to see this happen in their lifetime. She seems the best candidate for that. As Bill said, there's so much to happen before then, and the attacks are already beginning. I'm already getting the emails about, don't you remember that she killed Vince Foster? And I mean, this is going to start all over again.
And the flip side of the argument about it's women's turn is that 8-year elections are traditionally the opposite, that great George Costanza theory, do the opposite in life, that voters will inevitably go the opposite direction. You go from Bill Clinton to George W. Bush to Barack Obama, the opposite. So voters might look for the opposite in Barack Obama. In other words, they may not be trying to make a vote in an election, which is a social conscious vote, trying to make America look better to the rest of the world. They might be looking for something a little less glamorous.
On the other hand, I think what's going to be interesting is, of all those Obama supporters, remember there were this split among the Democrats last time. If those Obama supporters are now ready to vote for Hillary where they weren't the first time around. And I'm hearing some of that in Silicon Valley. Folks that definitely went for Obama last time and were important in his campaign and important in his fundraising are now saying, look, we're about to get on board with Hillary, but they're concerned. They want to make sure that she doesn't have the same campaign team that didn't get her across the finish line last time. Well, they want to make sure she hires on some of those smart young Obama people.
Right. Yeah. Hillary 2.0 should be smarter than Hillary 1.0. We'd all agree. And one of the big mistakes of Hillary 1.0 is that they took the progressive wing of their party for granted, and they didn't realize that there was a lot of pent-up frustration based on 8 years of Bill Clinton doing things like signing welfare reform and the Federal Defense of Marriage Act, and they've created an opening. And in that opening came Barack Obama. So one of the reasons why she is in San Francisco giving speeches, besides the fact she has time to give speeches, is that she wants to shore up her support with that wing.
And I would think, even though we can all be shamed for thinking about 2016 this soon, but the nature of the campaigning as done by Obama would seem to me to argue for getting started earlier, to put in place that network using social media that you really can't put in place, it seems to me, too early.
Well, in her case, she wants to put it in early. She wants to snuff out any opposition that might be there. It's a little analogous to actually Bob Dole in 1996, where Dole had the machinery, and again, it was his turn, so he wanted to make sure that a governor in particular did not come from out of nowhere to take it away. So Dole quite early rounded up endorsements, raked in a lot of money, and just created this structure that could not be violated.
We're coming up on a break, but quickly, what does this mean for Joe Biden? It's not going to be his turn?
Yeah, I think if Hillary's in, everybody agrees Biden's going to step aside. And right now, look, when you talk about the social media group and everyone now looking to help her out, I think Biden has a tough lift.
Joe will be 74, 76 in 2016, so he could run for governor of California.
That's right.
And on that cheery note, we're going to take a quick break. Stick around. We'll be right back.
It's been over 150 years since Wells Fargo first opened for business. Since then, we've enjoyed your community support, and we're passionate about returning it. Every day, Wells Fargo team members roll up their sleeves and donate their time to organizations and charitable groups throughout the Bay Area. Nationally, we've committed even more. In just the past 2 years alone, we've donated over $70 million to support schools and educational programs. It's a commitment we're proud of. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
Welcome back to the game. I'm Mark Simon. She's Kenny Lopez, and over here is our team of political insiders. I don't know. Bill Whalen of the Hoover Institution and Carla Marinucci of the San Francisco Chronicle. We got to talk a little bit more about 2016. I'm sorry, but Christie looks almost like he's running as hard as Hillary is in his own way. Is he the guy the Republicans could nominate, Bill? Because people like him a lot more than any of these other guys who may be righter on the issues, but not very likable.
Prediction, since I'm willing to make a fool of myself on these things, he will win re-election by 15 to 20 points easily. Reporters will flock to him, writing about he is the real deal for Republicans, and this is the model they should follow. Then in 2014, he faces a decision. Do I run as Chris Christie via version 2013, who is tough at times, but also very accommodating on issues such as medicinal marijuana, or do I become tough Chris Christie, the guy who was my first year of office, and I'm going after teachers and pensioners and so forth?
Can't he be both?
Well, he will offer both. I think he is a formidable candidate in this regard. He'll be reelected, so he'll be free at that point, liberated to run. He doesn't have to worry about dealing with the home state. He is a prodigious fundraiser, and he'll raise a lot of money very early. And I think he also benefits, oddly enough, from Rudolph Giuliani, who ran in 2008 as a Northeastern Republican and showed a lot of mistakes to be made on the path. So he, theory is Hillary benefits from having run before. Christie, I think, benefits from Giuliani running before. Yeah. But the question is, where would he actually jump into the process? What would be a first state? And does he go to New Hampshire first or Iowa? Does he wait later in the game like Giuliani did?
The toughest thing for him is how he plays with his own conservative base and the Rush Limbaugh crowd. That's his biggest problem, because you're right on the fundraising. When he came out here to Silicon Valley, went to Mark Zuckerberg's house, a lot of Democrats, venture capitalists, star people lined up to give him the money to get in the door. The guy has a definite, in terms of communications, he is a rock star.
And I think one thing he offers is there is a certain charisma vacuum, a personality forcefulness vacuum in the Republican Party right now. After going through John McCain and Mitt Romney as your nominees, you're really looking for a very tough guy to go out there.
He's a persona that I would think Republicans would like.
I think people are hungry for somebody who looks unscripted and kind of authentic. Now, Christie also has this tendency to call people idiots at press conferences and things like that. You can only do that so many times. Right. But on the other hand,
I don't know anybody who's going to be unpopular for doing that.
Especially if they're calling reporters idiots. But you're right. I mean, I just think there's something about that people find refreshing as compared to a lot of the other.
He is the anti-Obama in a lot of ways, not just in terms of body image, but also in terms of the style and the kind of frankness and gruffness about him. So if in theory voters are looking for the opposite in 2016, he would fit that.
Yeah.
Switch topics, immigration reform. Is it gone? Is it dead?
I'm not sure it is dead. I mean, look, we're seeing Republicans in California, some of them like Kevin McCarthy, the GOP whip, and others, really sort of open up the discussion. They understand what the numbers are in places like the Central Valley, and I think I don't think it's dead now. You had Carl Guardino of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group go and meet with McCarthy in Washington and come out of that meeting and say, you can bet on it that there will be a vote on this. So maybe that
critical condition. It's look, the House wants to break it apart and do it piecemeal, which is what the Republicans should have pushed for in the Senate in the first place. So if they do it in a piecemeal approach, then they're going to have to revisit the issue with the Senate and try to put together a conference committee. But what the pressure the California Republican Party feels is not the same pressure that Republicans in other states feel. And it's not a situation. Republicans feel it in the short term here. Republicans nationally looking at 2016 feel it. But Republicans running for re-election in 2014, where immigration can boomerang against them, they feel a different kind of pressure.
Well, in terms of Republicans and the Latino vote, isn't this sort of almost a generational moment? We have Prop 187 in California, with which you're well familiar, but a lot of people think that was almost a sea change in terms of how it spoke to the Latino community. This issue would seem to be another one of those moments where Republicans are either going to create successful ties to this particular voting bloc, which in many ways has a conservative social agenda, or they're not. And I wonder if piecemeal is the way to do that, because people are going to be looking for some sort of dramatic moment when when the Republicans make a statement, and the statement can't be one that takes months and months to roll out.
No, the problem for the Republicans has always been, when it comes to immigration, it's how to take a policy stand, a principled stand, but not appear to be against the individual standing, the individual hopes, and that's the trap they're falling into here again. If you're against immigration reform, you can have very sound reasons, such as you don't think the border security is going to work, you don't care for certain social benefits of it, you just don't think the money will be there, and so forth. But at the end of the day, you're going to appear to be anti-immigrant. And two people who understand this, speaking in 2016, are Marco Rubio and Jeb Bush, who are looking at their party from the realpolitik stance of, we have to grow, we have to get more Hispanic votes, and if we're against this bill or don't do something on this front, we're in deep, deep trouble.
And I think some of the more successful initiatives we're seeing on immigration reform are at the state level, like in California, where Ruben Barales is leading a charge to elect Latinos at local levels all across the state. His group has now put in, I think, more than 100 people, or helped more than 100 local leaders, and they're moving them up the ladder. And that's sort of a ground-up kind of initiative that I think the Republican Party has to look at as well.
We can't have a conversation about American politics without talking about sex. Sexting.
Yes.
I guess the question is, what is wrong with these people?
That's what we keep thinking.
Anthony Weiner. It looks as though, the good news is, it looks as though the New York voters sort of taking care of that problem as his numbers just continue to plummet. You've got this guy in San Diego, Filner, and that's sort of an apt name, I guess, for somebody who's as creepy as this guy seems to be. But what, you know, they're in a business where it's all about their public appearance.
You know, it's true that you've got this crowd of Democratic men behaving badly, and the Republicans have been able to seize on this and say, wait a minute, war on women? Hold on, let's talk about this. Because you're here in the Bay Area, we have a Sonoma County supervisor, Efren Carrillo, who was recently arrested in his socks and underwear outside a woman's house. He came to work this week and said, well, you know, I'm going to work through this with rehab. Same argument Filner had. At some point, people kind of go, really? I mean, on the taxpayer dime?
My party's had its problems, too. Remember Senator White's dance in the bathroom and all that.
And Filner as well.
The problem here is just there's no shame in the political class, but I would extend that. The same goes to the entertainment world. It goes to the world of sports. People just don't seem to live under any principle or shame where you've been caught doing something horrible. Your first instinct is, my God, I need to get away from the public stage and just quit my job and apologize profusely and retreat. Instead, people dig in. They tend to write it out. They come up with very, confused, tortured logic. Anthony Weiner in New York, for example, saying, well, I'm running for mayor, but I'm not really a role model. What I do in my private life doesn't really matter. So it's just, it's...
Well, it worked for Adam Clayton Powell.
And this is where I have to say, you remember Gavin Newsom had a little issue that took him into the headlines a couple of years back where he had an affair. He was separated, but at the same time with an aide. And he did the unusual thing, which was to have a press conference and say, everything you've heard is true. Yeah. And he admitted it all. And I think now, because of that, he's been able to sort of put that whole thing behind him for whatever he wants to run.
That was the Willie Brown approach, which is if you get caught, admit it, and then move on.
Maybe even more lovable, but lovable rogue. But it's not just politicians. Voters also bear responsibility here. And you look at Filner, for example. There are many women who have been treated poorly by him since he was elected mayor. But those who were mistreated by him before he was elected mayor, where were they when he was running for mayor? And they could have held a press conference and stopped this guy in his tracks before he got elected.
Well, exactly. I was just thinking there should be outrage at his behavior.
And you see this swept under the rug so much in politics where I know that Senator Simon is a boozer, but you know what, he's a good vote for us.
Exactly.
Or I know that Marinucci has a drug problem, but when she's sober, she's with us, she's okay.
You've heard this about Filner.
Right.
People knew he kind of had a problem. Nobody on Capitol Hill really said anything about it. You're absolutely right.
People just turn their back because politics is about maintaining power.
Yeah.
Well, the only problem I've ever had with drugs is they wear off. And on that cheery note, we're going to take a break. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
It's been over 150 years since Wells Fargo first opened for business. Since then, we've enjoyed your community support, and we're passionate about returning it. Every day, Wells Fargo team members roll up their sleeves and donate their time to organizations and charitable groups throughout the Bay Area. Nationally, we've committed even more. In just the past 2 years alone, we've donated over $70 million to support schools and educational programs. It's a commitment we're proud of. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
Welcome back to the game. I'm Mark Simon. She's Kitty Lopez, Bill Whalen of the Hoover Institution, and Carla Marinucci of the Chronicle. And I believe we're having way too much fun. Kitty.
Well, we were talking about kind of men behaving badly in politics. I know there's a statewide campaign to bring more women into politics.
That's right. And Democratic strategist Mary Hughes, who's a veteran and very well known, and just honored this week, it really has this campaign called Close the Gap. And I think what she's talking about is sort of some disturbing numbers, that the numbers of women in state legislative offices in California, this is a Democratic song, have actually dropped over the past decade. And this goes to, I think, the fundraising issue, and sort of the way the parties are structured. But the fact is that, she raises the question, and many other women do too, would we have these issues, Filner and all the rest, if there were more elected women?
There's a selectiveness here to women running for office. Women's groups are calling for Hillary Clinton to be president. I don't hear a draft Sarah Palin, draft Susanna Martinez, draft Nikki Haley movement out there. A woman ran for governor in California in 2010. She was blistered by fellow women as a bad woman. So the sisterhood has kind of rather careful litmus test for who it likes.
And the Close the Gap California campaign makes no bones about seeking progressive women, which means Democrats.
So that's really the question here. Do you want a woman, or do you want a woman who thinks a certain way? My argument would be, if you think women are better at the job than men, then you should be a little more including.
You're
in your
right in the sense that the Democrats have a couple of campaigns. Close the Gap is one. Emily's List, a huge group which has come out in support. Now Republicans have Unite the Right, and the head of that group is going to come out and speak to California Republicans along with Rick Perry at their convention coming up. So I think that's interesting. There is going to be a movement on the Republican side.
The implication of that, though, is that if you rely on Republicans to elect women, they won't do it. They won't elect them in the same numbers.
How many Democratic women governors are there in America right now?
I left that information in my other jacket.
However, look at the Republicans in Sacramento. The number of women, I think you can count on 2 hands at the most, but there's so few, it's ridiculous.
Women have been in leadership positions in the legislature on the Republican side.
That's true. But they're still not. Their numbers are not large.
You're both right. You're both right. Let's talk a little bit about the local campaign, Mike Honda versus Ro Khanna down in southern Santa Clara County. Hugely active campaign, way ahead of what the normal cycle would be. What's interesting to me about this is normally when somebody takes on an incumbent, what's their first challenge? Explain to people why they don't want the incumbent. And it's usually because the incumbent has done something that's got people upset. All Mike Honda has done has been Mike Honda. He hasn't really created a lot of controversy.
I think this is one of the cases that shows how the top 2 primary is sort of filtering down and changing California politics, because you never would have had a challenger to a 7-term congressman otherwise. But Ro Khanna has raised almost $2 million so far, which is unheard of for somebody challenging an incumbent Democrat in his own party. That's unbelievable to start with. I think Honda's challenge now, I mean, there's a generational challenge, there's an ethnic vote challenge when you have a rising South Asian, Indian American community. That this is one of the biggest districts in the country for that kind of population. They are hungry for representation, and I think Khanna's gotten a lot of money and support from them, and I think it's going to be interesting to watch how this race plays out in terms of issues related directly to Silicon Valley.
I live in Palo Alto, and every day I count my blessings that I do not live in this district. I cannot tell you how aggravated I'd be by robocalls and mail and everything that is coming away, because when somebody has $2 million, that means they're going to find 2 million ways to spend $2 million. It means they're going to pay for you to death. But Carla's right. This is the open primary, and this is a good thing, ultimately. You're taking a, 7-term incumbent like Mike Honda, and for the first time in a long time, he has to work for re-election. That means what? It means he's accountable to the people. He's going to have to be on the ground back in the district, and in theory, this is what congressmen are supposed to be doing, but they don't, because they get safe and comfortable in their jobs.
Let's talk practical terms, though. It's not like running against Pete Stark.
No.
This is a guy who may not have achieved a whole heck of a lot, which would probably be the most telling knock on him.
And unlike Stark, he's not going to basically dig his own grave.
And that's the other thing, is he also hasn't alienated his constituents. Right. He's been a pretty standard, sort of solid member of Congress.
And I guess the question is, in this social media age, is that enough now anymore? Khanna is out there. He's got a team of some of the top Obama people, including Jeremy Bird and a number of other people, fundraising, Steve Spinner, people who were heavy-duty Obama people. They're working for him, and I think this is going to be it's going to be interesting because these guys know how to do social media. Yeah, we're going to see this as the platform for whether this works.
To me, the generational aspect is fascinating because usually it's an issue one party makes against the other. In 1980, for example, a lot of Democratic senators got swept out because they'd been around since Moses wore short pants. So generationally, it was time for them to go. But within a party, to force somebody out by saying essentially it's your time to go, the people to watch, I think Nancy Pelosi and the Democratic leadership are the ones to watch for, because they will at some point have to make a calculation that either Mike Honda is survivable and therefore we'll get behind him and save him, or it is time to toss him.
Well, they've already endorsed Mike Honda. Yeah. All of the Democratic leadership has been.
But there's endorsing, but then there's also controlling the money too.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, are they really going to help him? Because if they don't and he loses, there's a whole new caucus of people who want to know if they're next to have the party bail out.
The other thing they can do with Honda, and maybe this is the calculation they make, at some point they just say, Mike, it's time to go, and guess what? There's a nice job waiting for you in California and Washington.
Is it telling that we haven't spoken very much about President Obama?
Yeah.
Is it possible he got to lame duckery faster than anybody we've ever seen?
I think the latest field poll numbers of Obama in California show a real malaise here. Yeah. When you're talking about losing, dropping 10 points, 15 points among women, and 15 points among under 40 voters. That's his base. There's clearly a dissatisfaction. Last time he came to California and just was fundraising 24/7. A lot of Democrats complained, hey, why isn't he using the state to talk about the Affordable Care Act? Mm-hmm. This is a state that's implemented it. It's actually doing what he wants. He really sort of brushed that off with a very quick press conference in San Jose, but hasn't really done that kind of work here in California.
Since we're in the midst of the Giants season, it's a slump. And it's a slump in which you do kind of strange habits, such as holding a Friday news conference the other week, which really didn't have a lot of drive and focus to it. He's been out on the road doing a bus tour to push student loans. So, when in doubt with governing, go campaign. But he seems to always be campaigning for things. There's a certain bit of anyway with this. It's a little kind of boring by now.
Almost a lack of focus. I mean, it almost seems as though he's sort of overwhelmed by all the things that have to come his way. And there's still the same old knock on him, which is that he doesn't make friends very easily, doesn't seek people out.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Mark, because, I mean, that story about Gavin Newsom being called in by Hillary Clinton is a perfect example, because that's an example of what the Clinton team has done from day one. Keep an eye on everybody in California who could help them out and make sure to make them feel welcome into the pack. The Obama team has really never done that on fundraisers or anything else.
But they understand they need more friends, so this week they got another dog.
Does he find his way out of this, or is it a done deal?
I'm kind of interested. Bill said there's opportunities for him here, I think, in California. Other than fundraising, we're going to see if he takes some of those.
I have been writing for the past 5 years, mostly to deaf ears, on the question of what America's first black president is doing for black America. He has been to Oakland, California numerous times to raise money. He never goes into Oakland and offers an agenda. So that is something he could wade into if he wanted to in his last 2 years.
And we have to stop you on that note. Bill Whalen, Carla Marinucci, thank you for being here. I'm Mark Simon.
I'm Kitty Lopez.
And thanks for being with us. Join us next time on The Game.